Hi there, I'm Frater IAC. Several people lately have told me I should start a YouTube channel, which I did. Uh, this YouTube channel is not really it's for a narrow community. I'm doing this for Hermetic initiates, particularly in the Franz Barden strand of Hermetic initiation. Um, I post a lot on Perseus Arcane Academy. I'm on several Barden Facebook groups. Um, and now I've got this YouTube channel. And what I hope to do with this YouTube channel is put out videos that actually contribute to practical knowledge within Hermeticism. Because there are so many things that are out there, but I don't see many things about my specialty area, which is talismans. And the thing about talismans, why I'm so into those is my family background, one branch of my family had a background in folk magic, which you might also call conjure. So I've been involved with talismans, amulets, good luck charms for many, many years. Um, I just also uploaded a fatty liver tincture video that I did. It's on the channel too. Um, so any subsequent videos I do are going to be around things that I think might be useful for you if you are a serious Hermetic practitioner. So anyway, that's what we're doing here. And this particular video is going to be about planning, making, and exalting a compound talisman for a specific purpose. Okay. So now I've always been pretty disciplined when it comes to my magical work. Um, I didn't really, I've had the calling for many years, but I didn't really embrace my calling until I was, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s, somewhere around there. And I'm 66 now. So I've been at this for some time, but talismans are always a big part of my work. So anyway, a day in the life. Okay, I always get up. Um, Usually I wake up around 4 in the morning and I say my morning prayers. Then I go back to bed. Uh, when I get up, I'll do a little bit of exercise, some stretching, and so on. Um, and then I'll do some active introspection. Um, some exercises in that. And I meditate. I spend at least an hour in meditation every day. Lately, I've been working through the Key to the True Kabbalah by Franz Martin. And what it took me about a year to develop a systematic approach to how to do that. But I've been meditating on each letter for an average of about 205 minutes at the Akashic level, and I'm almost through the alphabet at the mental level. And ideally, I'm going to go through the alphabet 4 times: Akashic, mental, astral, and physical or material. Um, and of course, I use formulas in magic now, and I have been actively working with some spirits. So, I'm fairly advanced, reasonably so, but I make a pretty good talisman. My talismans are good. They work and they're powerful, especially since I got done with step 8 of initiation into Hermetics and actually internalized that. And I've got a course up on Perseus Arcane Academy about how to do that step 8 thing, making those liquid fluid condensers. And remember that in Barden speak, a fluid is a magical energy. It's like the electric fluid, the magnetic fluid. And these are magical energies. And so a talisman is a fluid condenser, and a fluid condenser is a talisman because what you're doing when you make a talisman is you're condensing magical intent into an object. Either it's a liquid, a thing that you make in step 8, uh, or there are many other kinds of talismans. I am This particular talisman we're going to be making in this video is a bag, and I'll get into that later. But I do several magical acts a week. One of my favorite things to do is elemental influence. Uh, but I do a lot of work with psalms, and I use talismans. I have a number of them to amplify my intent in certain ways. I also journal a lot. I read, and then every night. When I get to the point where I'm unwinding and ready to retire, go to bed, I do a routine of introspection. I do that every night because that drives my active introspection the next day. And by active introspection, I mean those things Barden puts out in steps 1 and 2. The magic of washing, the magic of eating and drinking, auto-suggestion, volitional acts. And then in step 4, he has a elemental harmonization exercise that works for that. The key to the true Kabbalah has letters that aid in coming into balance. And then shamans or native elders of tribal societies um, often have methods such as soul recapture, recapitulation. I do a lot of mirror work and so on. So anyway, and then a big part of my magical praxis is dream work. So you can imagine what happens when it suddenly becomes a bit more difficult to remember my dreams. And this picture that's on this slide is a Shutterstock picture that I took from Discover magazine from a July 23rd article published in 2019 by Megan Schmidt. Why some of us remember dreams while others rarely do. Because I was really having a problem. Um, Unfortunately, early this year, it started being more difficult for me to remember my dreams. And at first, I didn't think anything of it. I've kept my dream journal. I think it said on the last slide, I've kept my dream journal since March of 2017. This current dream journal. I've got other journals that are older than that, but I've kept this particular journal, and it's got over 100 pages. Why? Because most dreams really aren't anything but your unconscious mind working through the day to day. Okay. That most dreams really aren't worth remembering. Some dreams are. And I was always able to tell. I've always been able to tell when a dream that I had was going to be worth remembering. And of course, I immediately write down some key words before I even lift my head off the pillow. And then I go and to my dream journal and I write it down. So that's how it is. But man, by midsummer, maybe June, late June, early July, it got to the point, even with significant dreams that I knew were important, the memory had just drained away the minute I lifted my head off the pillow. I couldn't remember my dreams. And finally, it came to a head on August 2nd of this year. Okay. Um, and I'm putting this video up August 30th because I'm not one to sit on a problem. I want to do something about it. So what I decided to do is make a talisman. because I do that. That's what I do. I make a lot of talismans and I use them. And my talismans are good and they're powerful because I've been doing it for a while. So I figured, well, dreams. I should make a dream catcher. Now, the Ojibwe tribe lived up by Lake Michigan, up by the Great Lakes region. And they had a supernatural figure, a goddess figure named Spider Woman, Asibikaashi. And she's a powerful figure who protects children and the people. And she's often associated with dream catchers because Asibikaashi used to personally watch over every child's cradle board, weaving a protective web to protect that child from bad dreams. But as the Ojibwe tribe spread across the land, what happened is that Asabakashi worked with the elder women of the tribe to leverage her work by making dream catchers, which are basically modeled after spider webs. They take a willow twig, a green willow twig, and they bend it into a hoop, and then they string sinew, animal sinew, um, between around the hoop in a spider web kind of deal. And the idea is the gaps in the web allow good dreams to come through, and the lines in the web trap the bad dreams. That's how it is. So I'm like, yeah, dream catcher. That's what I'll do. Nope. Um, I generally always do a divination prior to any magical work because you always want to do it's just good practice. So and I learned that actually years and years ago from Don Michael Craig, who wrote Modern Magic, right? Because he always was having you do a divination before anything, and I use the tarot in my divinations. So anyway, I said, should I make a dream catcher? The first thing I got was destitution, the five of coins. So if I make a dream catcher, all of a sudden I'm gonna go broke. No. Okay. And just to be sure, I did a second divination because that's what I do. And I got thievery and deception. This happy fellow that's stealing the swords. So I was like, okay, well, Dreamcatcher, it's not. We're not going to do that. But what am I going to do? Well, in step three, the very first paragraphs of step three in Barton's initiation into Hermetics, he talks about the pillars of the inner temple or the Temple of Solomon. And this is essentially your inner astral temple. You have the pillar, there's four pillars. One goes with each element. So you have a pillar of silence, which goes with the earth element, the pillar of knowledge with the air element, the pillar of volition with the fire element, and the pillar of courage with water. Um, I generally start all of my magical works with silence. Why? Because the pillar, and I don't imagine this as a pillar. Obviously, you can see I've got a picture of a well here. Okay, I think of this as a well of silence. Because as you go through active introspection and, chip away all these vices that no longer serve you, you get angry, you have resentment, you have self pity, blah, blah, blah. You want to get rid of those. That's what the soul mirrors in steps one and two are all about. You want to get rid of those and turn them into virtues. So, anyway, as that happens, what you find is that those virtues take root in you, but what you're doing by getting rid of your vices is you're getting rid of this little ego self that stands on your shoulder and screams, me, me, me. Selfish, selfish, selfish. You're getting rid of all of that. And as that happens, a void is left. That becomes your well of silence. And as you learn to go to the depth point, to move your energy around and transfer your consciousness into various objects, and later you learn to transfer your consciousness to your depth point, which is your solar plexus chakra, that is the portal. It's the portal to the astral realm. It's a portal to the Akashic records. It's a portal. And so when you transfer your consciousness to your depth point and you just sit there, what you do is you ask, or what I do is I'll ask the question. I want to make a talisman for the purpose of dream work. I want to elevate my dream work to a new level. What shall I do? Then you remain silent. And I generally always get an insight. And then I practice divination on that insight again, because let's not be stupid. So, just because you get some insight, you want to test that out, think about it critically. So I thought about, well, there's a thing called a dream pillow that I've heard of vaguely. Should I make a dream pillow? And I did a divination because it came to mind. That was the intuition that bubbled up from the well of silence. And I got excitement, the page of wands. Why, look at that young man. He's excited. He's ready to move forward eagerly into making a dream pillow. Hey, yay. So I did a second thing, and look at that. Boy, I got the victory parade. Um, the word that goes with this card, of course, the Six of Wands, is recognition. Um, I don't really care that much about recognition, but it's a victory parade. He's got a victory wreath hanging on this. That's a yes. So okay, a dream pillow it is. So here we go. Now, what do I know about dream pillows? Not much, but I know a lot about conjure bags. Okay. And conjure bags are also known as gree or mojo bags. And usually they're small bags made of cloth or leather, and they're filled with a bunch of stuff. They're always going to be a dream bag, or a conjure bag is always going to be a compound talisman, in that it's going to have more than one ingredient. Okay. That's just that's how they are. That's their nature. So mostly these conjurer bags are used for protection and to bring good luck. And it started off in West Africa with the Dagomba people in what's now Ghana. And the practice was brought to the Americas in the slave ships. But you know, I've I've made conjure bags for quite a while. Um, and they work. They really do. And so, as I said, they are compound talismans, and they contain a carefully chosen mix of herbs, crystals, stones, roots, oils, scents, and personal items like hair or nails, chosen for their specific magical properties. They are charged with prayers, chants, and visualizations. Now, in terms of the personal items, some people with these conjure bags, they'll put urine in it, they'll put hair in it, they'll put fingernail clippings, baby teeth, all kinds of. I don't do that. Now, that's my personal preference, but I don't ever use something from my own body to consecrate a magical object or add into a talisman or liquid fluid condenser. I just don't do that. Um, for personal reasons. I just don't. You can. I'm not telling you not to, but think carefully before you do it. Because if you die all of a sudden and somebody, because I'm not a spring chicken, And this talisman that I made, this dream talisman, is powerful. It's really put me through some changes when I've been testing it. So, it's got some serious power. So let's say I die tonight, and then my family gets all, what's this? What dreams may come? What does that mean? Well, if it's got a piece of my bodily stuff in there, like fingernails or something, um, what's going to happen with it is if they start using it and they use it for bad purposes, for serving the darkness, then that comes back on me karmically. I don't ever put any of my own bodily fluids or anything ever in a talisman for that reason. So anyway, enough of that. Um, when properly prepared, and this is worth looking, this last paragraph here, a conjure bag they're all gonna require regular care, okay? You gotta meditate with it. You gotta talk to it. You gotta feed it periodically, and I feed it with the oil of abramelin and opening oil. uh, and incense. I'll use some various types of incense or other things to maintain their power, and or don't forget the chemical exaltation using aurum metallicum. Now reference Barden, step 8, the section in step 8 on fluid condensers where he says every magician should have some gold around because even the tiniest bit of gold can dramatically amplify or exalt the power of a talisman. Okay? And remember your Paracelsus, okay? Because Paracelsus, when he was making, in his case, healing tinctures, Paracelsus learned how to exalt. He used alchemy to separate out the material, astral, mental, and spirit parts of these plants he was using, right? And then he'd recombine them in a way that amplified their power so that the reunited whole was greater than the sum of the parts. And the word he coined for that was exaltation. So, the late Ron Clark, in his Barden Companion, um, he talks about how Aurum Metallicum works fine. And believe it or not, that's all Ron said about the fluid condensers, you know. So, but I mean, I understand fluid condensers as talismans, and I've worked with them for years. So anyway, enough of that. Here's the deal. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make a dream pillow. Oh my gosh, what in the world am I gonna put in it? What ingredients will I use? Well, gosh, that depends on what I want it to do, doesn't it? Because I'm going to try and use the laws of analogy to develop a list of ingredients that's going to amplify my intent for what I want this talisman to do for me. But I'm not out to spend an arm and a leg, so I want to see what I have on hand right now. Well, I've been a practicing magus for some time, so I got a bunch of stuff right here. I mean, I've got a whole drawer filled with herbs. So, I'm going to look at those first and then determine what I still might need to get. Okay, so that we're good. We're in business. All right. Ah, well, here's what I had on hand. And as you can see, it's a giant table. That's okay, though. We're not going to go through it line by line, but I do want to point out some stuff on this thing, okay? So, every ingredient that what I did first, I looked at each thing and then I researched in Cunningham's Encyclopedia. There are some other herbal reference books that I have, and certainly Google. Um, and I would research each one about its potential use in dream work. Because, man, we're so lucky to have the internet. It's right there, and obviously you got to pay attention and make sure you're not downloading stuff from the internet that's idiotic because there's a bunch of stuff out there that's not really true. But generally, these things, Google works pretty well for doing basic research, and then you look and find independent sources that tell you what Google told you to make sure that, it's accurate. So anyway, that's what I did. And I went down this entire list. Okay, acacia flowers. They they bring purity of heart and mind, spiritual clarity and transformation, and they help you discern truth and dreams. But I did a divination as to whether I should use that particular plant in this talisman, and I got the Ten of Swords. Okay, that's the one where the guy's, laying on his stomach and he's pierced with 10 swords. No, that is a definite no. Ruin. Don't do it. So anyway, all right. So then I went down to agrimony, good for enhancing dream recall, lucid dreaming, prophetic dreams. Yes, I got the Fool. Definite yes. That is a beginning, and so on. And I went right down the line. So I ended up choosing all of the maybes and all of the yeses and getting rid of the nos. So I did not put acacia flowers. Surprisingly, chamomile flowers turned out to be a no. And chamomile flowers are, I mean, I use those to help. In the earlier steps of Barden, I think it's step 4 or 5, Barden has you use chamomile tea as on a saturated handkerchief to put over your eyes repeatedly, and that helps you develop your clairvoyance. So chamomile's great, but not for this because I got the Eight of Swords. So that's loss. We don't want to do that. Restriction. Oh, that's the restriction. That's the lady that is blindfolded, about ready to fall in a pool of water, and she's surrounded by swords. I usually think of that card as constraints of your own making. But, nonetheless, it was definitely a no. Hawthorn berries, death. Don't do it. That's a no. Um, let's see, what are their no's? I got the lemon balm, Melissa. That would have been great in dreams. Yeah, man, I've dreamed with Melissa for like several significant times, but not in this dream talisman. And so licorice root, really good magnetite. I have some pieces of magnetite, and it's you can crumble a little tiny piece off. And I thought, well, magnetite, it's going to attract dreams. Nah, I got a definite no. The Ten of Swords again. So definitely not using magnetite. And then I got a stinging nettle leaf. Now nettle is extremely powerful. My nettle tincture, the fluid condenser that I made in step 8, is extremely powerful. But not in this talisman because I got the Five of Pentacles, which is hardship. So if I use stinging nettle, it's going to be give me hardship. So I'm not going to do that. So anyway, I came out with a list of ingredients that I'm going to put in this dream bag, this conjure bag for dream work. Okay, so that's what I did. Now, again, I have a specific way that I charge talismans. And this is just a visual illustration because I charged each ingredient to this talisman individually. I named the talisman What Dreams May Come, and it is a compound of a number of ingredients that you saw in that table on the last slide. But essentially, when you charge an ingredient to a talisman, or if you've got a one-piece talisman like a crystal, you're going to charge it. And the Ajna chakra, well, your head is the seat of the fire element. It's where the fire element lives. It's where your eyes are. It's where your brain synapses fire. Uh, it is, your focus. It's your focused will. Okay. And that's the fiery will. And then you have the throat chakra, which is the cosmic word. Remember, your feelings, your thoughts, your words, and your actions create vibrations that are way more powerful than most people think. They can permeate the universe. So, as you advance spiritually, I have found that your magical authority, the power of your magic, has directly to do with your spiritual quality, your magical authority that you've developed, by this. And then of course your solar plexus chakra is where your depth point is. That is the portal, but it's also the seat of your will, believe it or not. So I mean you've got and how is it that solar plexus chakra and the Ajna chakra are both seats of the will? Well, I don't know, but they are. So when I'm charging a talisman, I will focus energy from each of these chakras on that talisman. Because remember that Franz Barden tells you, and this is all he tells you. I sometimes I get a little irritated with Franz because he was kind of a scamp, because he would just, tell you like look at this. Every object can be influenced with the help of the imagination and the will. Okay, but how do you do it? Well, he's silent on that. And I've developed since I've started working with the letters, and I read a lot, so I ran across um, a couple of very advanced metaphysical books. Valentin Tomberg, one of my all-time favorite books, is Meditations on the Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermetics. And that he wrote anonymously. So the author is officially anonymous, but the guy's name was Valentin Tomberg. He was a devout Catholic and also a follower of Rudolf Steiner. So that kind of gives you an idea about who he was. And then Muni Sadhu was an amazing man. Um, and he immigrated from Europe after the Second World War, I believe to South America. And he was an electrician, but he was an adept. And he wrote a book called The Tarot. There are many advanced things in those two books that will inform your practice about how you proceed with magic. Because all Kabbalistic magic has a shape, it has a sound, it has a form, it has a movement. And that's all I'll say about it necessarily, uh, except just the vertical cross method that I'm going to talk about later. But you should definitely read your Muni Sadhu, the Tarot, and you should read Valentin Tomberg, Meditations on the Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermetics. That's those will flesh in a lot of gaps that you had when you got done with initiation into Hermetics. They're that good. So anyway, enough of that. Um, this is how this little fellow is me. He looks better than me actually, but he's charging this talisman. So oh my goodness. What's going on here? Well, I'm using a leather bag which measures 3 inches by 4.5 inches. So it's a little guy. It's not a very big bag. And so I'm not going to be able to cram it absolutely full. I've got a lot of ingredients here. So I've got to think about how I'm going to do it. What's my approach going to be? Well, that's where we got the mortar and pestle, right? So I'm going to put these leaves in this mortar and pestle, and I'm going to grind them into powder, and I'm going to put a little tiny bit in a little tiny jar, and that's going to be that ingredient mixed into this talisman. So there we go. So your mortar and pestle, you're going to powder this stuff. All right. And so one of the things that's interesting, and maybe I should back up and just go over this table. Um, each of these herbs and these other objects, lapis lazuli, larimar, the phantom quartz point, sulfur, these are they're associated, they correspond with planetary powers as well as the elements, okay? And then each has a specific personality in terms of working with it with dreams. So then back to this slide. This is the moon. These are the moon ingredients. Now, mugwort, also called black sage or dream sage, has long been associated with the moon and has pretty much always been an ingredient in these dream pillow talismans. So, mugwort. And what it does is it enhances dreams, it enables lucid dreaming, and it will improve dream recall. Now, one of the patterns I noticed while I was inventorying these ingredients is that every ingredient that helps with lucid dreaming also improves recall. Well, that makes sense because by definition, in a lucid dream, you are conscious within that dream. You're conscious that you are dreaming. And then ideally, you can start exerting your will in that dream and move around. Now, I can do that sometimes, but I can't always do it. And I want to be always be able to do that. So that's part of what I want from this dream talisman. So anyway, that's mugwort. And then lavender, I like lavender. I like lavender a lot. Aromatherapy is very, very powerful. The olfactory sense is extremely powerful. And if you are in earlier stages of Barden, where you're in steps 1 and 2, and you're starting to talk about the senses, the sensory imagination, okay, don't neglect the olfactory sense, the sense of smell, because it is extremely powerful. And I mean, think about like going to your grandma's house for Thanksgiving dinner when you were a kid, and you would walk in there and there's the smell. You'd smell the turkey, you'd smell the stuffing, you'd smell the vegetables, and all in that was the smell of grandma's house. I mean, that's the olfactory sense is extremely powerful in evoking memories. So lavender is really good. And in terms of dream work, it's just relaxing. It's restful. It promotes the a thing. And you can see those beads down at the bottom of the picture. That is a mala. That has 108 beads on it. And when I charge I charged each one of these ingredients, it took all day. And I was exhausted at the end of the day because I went once around the mala with each ingredient and I would chant what I wanted it to do. So the procedure is you go to the depth point of the jar. So I'm in the depth point, standing on top of the mugwort powder. I'm a little tiny guy inside that jar, and I am chanting lucid dreams, improve dream recall, enhance my dreams. And then with the in breath, I bring that back. So the chant takes it up to the divine mind, and the in breath is the benediction, where that manifestation comes back. That's how I charge it to ingredient, do a talisman. So, I did that, and each one of these things got once around the old mala, doing that. And that's how I do it. So, is it a lot of work? Oh, yeah. And one of the things that's really interesting, and I think I have it on a later slide, so I won't belabor it here, but this was the moon. Now, here's Saturn. And again, you have the picture of the mala. But now I've got brick dust. That's brick dust. You can't read the second word there, but it's brick dust. And brick dust is just what it is. I mean, you take a brick and you take a sledgehammer and you pound the brick and you keep pounding it until it's powder. And that becomes brick dust. Brick dust is heavily used in conjure as a protective element. So if, like, you have you're crossed or you're hexed or somebody's you're undergoing some kind of external attack, whether it's intentional or not, you can do some rituals. There are a bunch of protective rituals you can do, and brick dust is sometimes, not always, but sometimes an ingredient in there. And the way brick dust is usually used in protection is you put it along your windowsills and on your door jamb, and that way it protects you from negative energies coming into your home. Um, and there's a ritual that is called the fiery wall of protection. I may do some videos about these things because this is some cool magic. But anyway, that said, I used brick dust because I want to protect myself in dreams. Now, Phil Rice on his Substack has some really neat things about lucid dreaming and astral travel. Um, and certainly he makes the point that when you're in a dream, you're in the astral world. You're when you're in the theta stage of sleep, yeah, I mean you're in the astral plane. But it's you're part of the astral plane. It has boundaries. And ideally, if you're advanced in dream work, you want to be able to transcend those boundaries and travel. Okay. But in order to do that, you need some protection. And there are a couple of things that I put in here to protect me while I'm in doing dream work. And one of those is brick dust. It protects dreams from external evil influences. Now, elm I told you about, well, I don't know if I've told you about it, but I have a friend who's a pretty powerful witch, and she has a coven. And I went over to her house to pick up some tomato plants, earlier, like in the spring. And I walk over there, or I don't walk over there, I had to drive, it's across town. But I got over there, and we walk into her backyard, and it looks like a little tiny thing. I'm like, wow, okay. And so we went into her conservatory, which is a separate building from her house, and we meditated together there. When we were done meditating in that conservatory, we went out, and all of a sudden her yard looked much, much larger. This was such an interesting experience. And we walked around and into a place that was enclosed with a 4-foot brick wall. And in that enclosure was a giant, huge elm tree. And she talked about how this elm tree is the spirit that protects her group. And she asked me, would you like to touch it? And I said, oh, yes, I absolutely would. And so she and I put our hands on this elm tree, and it was just, I felt its power immediately. And trees have very powerful spirits, and this elm spirit is really powerful. And I looked, and this elm tree is just, it's over 100 years old, and it had a canopy going over the roof of her place. And I said, well, has it ever dropped a branch? No, it protects us. It protects me, and it protects my house, and it protects my group. That's what she said. I was like, wow. And so these elm leaves bring prophetic dreams. They connect to elemental spirits and again, strong protection. And then wild pansy is an interesting herb. The wild pansy, along with the violet, are very powerful, and Barden lists them in step 8 as ingredients in the compound fluid condenser that he has you make to juice up your magic mirror. And I may do a video about training your mirror too, because that's the mirror work is really vital to my practice. I do a lot of mirror work. They're just very, very handy. And Barton even says that, he's got a whole section, not only in initiation into hermetics in steps 8 and 9, but he's got a whole chapter on the magic mirror and how to use it as a tool in his practice of magical evocation. So magic mirrors are a big deal. They're very versatile. So anyway, the wild pansy itself is very powerful as a spirit, and it helps one remember their dreams. So they're the Saturn uh, herbs. And again, I went once around the mala using the vertical cross charging method for each of these. And the way I start with that is I'll usually hold in this case, the tiny little jar up to my face, and I will speak to it about what I want from it. I'll tell it what my mission is, um, my magical mission, which I told you on the first slide, so I won't belabor that, guard into the heart and all that. But then I breathe into the jar, the breath of life. And then I transfer myself to the depth point of that jar where I'm standing on the powder of that particular thing. And then I'll use the mala and I will chant what I want it to amplify. And then with the in breath, I'll bring that benediction back down as a manifestation from the divine mind. Okay, so it takes a minute to go around and charge each of these, and you do it one at a time. That's why my talisman is powerful, because I put the work in, And then here's your Jupiter batch. Now, Jupiter, I'm a Sagittarian, and so Jupiter is my planet, and it's the expansive. You're going to create these wonderful structures. It's just wonderful. And so agrimony is for lucid dreaming and to enhance recall. Dandelion root is extremely powerful, and it gives you the power of divination in your dreams, and it can help you actually perform astral magic in your dreams, and it gives you it enhances your psychic abilities, and it also improves your connection with spirits. So dandelion root is an extremely powerful plant ally, you know. And generally with these plants, um, you know, I I will dream with a plant. I'll ingest a little bit of the plant, either as a tea or maybe I'll just chew up a little piece and then I'll sleep on it and I dream. And that dream helps me connect with the spirit of that plant. Now, my witch friend tells me that each plant has one little node of awareness, much like we humans. Each of us has a little node of, oh, I am this person. This is who I am. But then there is a collective consciousness. And with trees, with plants, this is a collective consciousness that goes through all of the plants of that species around the earth. So dandelion is an extremely powerful spirit. Now, you'll see that I have a crystal here, and that is lapis lazuli. That is good for lucid dreaming and enhancing dream recall. And you'll remember all the ones that are good for lucid dreaming also help you enhance recall. But lapis is quite powerful and is considered a semi-precious stone. Um, And then last, we have linden, which is a sacred tree. It protects from nightmares, it enhances intuition, and it increases the vividness of dreams. So that's a winning ingredient. So we're good. These are my Jupiters. Now, Mars. Now here we have High John the Conqueror, otherwise known as well, it's got several names: John the Conqueror, High John the Conqueror, John the Conqueror root, and it's from a plant called Ipomaea purga. And a piece of High John root. A lot of times people will carry a piece of High John as a good luck charm because that's what it's known for. It's a very good luck charm, but and it's powerful just intrinsically as for luck and good fortune. But High John, man, those roots are rock hard. They're just so I had to take a knife and whittle off a bunch and then pound it to pieces, with the mortar and pestle, to get it powdered. That was not an easy process. The High John took some doing, but anyway, that enhances the strength of will. Because see, here's the thing: if you're in dream world, okay, you're asleep and you go into a dream and you become conscious in that dream because you've learned how to do that, so the dream becomes lucid. The next step is to begin to control the dream using your will, right? And so that's what the High John allows for. So I saw this as an essential ingredient with any talisman I want to up the level of my dream work. Because that's one of the things I want to know how to do. And then Rue is good for perceiving the threads of destiny. That's really important. Um, because, at the quantum level, it's just a giant field that's populated by atoms or even smaller pieces than that in various configurations. I mean, that's what reality actually is. We just don't perceive it that way. But Rue can help you perceive the threads of destiny, and it also protects against evil spirits. And I want to just say no to evil spirits in my dreams. Silly me. But anyway, and then the next one is tobacco. And tobacco is extremely powerful as a spirit. It has been used by indigenous tribes in the Americas for millennia to dream. It produces vivid dreams. It helps with spirit connections. And it is a teacher. The tobacco spirit is a powerful teacher. But you have to ask. You have to ask it to teach you, and it will. So anyway, once around the mala for each one of these, and then we're going to move on to the sun. Whoa, that's a neat picture of the sun. Um, it's amazing, that red and that yellow. But anyway, these are my sun ingredients. Eyebright. Now, you'll remember that eyebright in step 4 or 5 of initiation into Hermetics, Barton has you make an eyebright tea, an infusion. Okay, and you make oh no, that's chamomile. But eyebright he has you use as an eye wash to help strengthen your eyes. But it also in dream work it can show truth in dreams. And it gives you insight, divine insight, and helps you accurately interpret the symbols that you may encounter in a dream. That's a big deal. You need to, because you do a lot of your dreams, your messages are going to come in the form of symbols. And so you got to know how to interpret those. And I'll tell you about a dream that I had when I started using my talisman after I made it. at the toward the end of this show. So hold that thought. Frankincense. This is frankincense resin, and I pounded a few fragments of it into powder, um, and it aids recall. It enhances lucid dreamings, but it also helps you connect with the divine mind, with God. That's really important. And this quartz point, as you can see, is a phantom quartz point. It's a little tiny thing, because these are little tiny jars. Um, but this is called phantom quartz. And what makes it phantom quartz is that you have the clear quartz crystal, but inside of it, you have these shadows. And you can see it looks like an attempt on the inside of the crystal when it was forming to do a second crystal inside. And that gives it specific properties as a talisman. So it will help you perceive karmic threads, and it also helps connect with Akasha. And this particular point has a great deal of meaning to me because I had a dear, dear friend who I worked closely with for over a decade, um, who passed away, oh gosh, 8 or 9 years ago from a pancreatic cancer. And she was just an awesome lady, and she was quite powerful spiritually. But she and her husband went out to Taos, New Mexico, one year on a vacation, and she brought me back. They went to Chamayo, which is a little kind of a monastery area where they have sacred dirt that is known for healing. So she got me a little bottle of the sacred dirt from Chamayo, and then she got me this quartz point, this phantom quartz point, and I've always treasured it. But I decided to use it in this dream talisman because she has often appeared to me in dreams as a guide. So very, very powerful woman. So anyway, that's the quartz point. And then rosemary, of course, is just good for recalling dreams. And that's your simple kitchen spice. Then I put sulfur, the sulfur element. And sulfur is obviously strongly connected with the sun, and it protects, but it also strengthens the will in the dream. So those are my sun elements, my sun ingredients. Now, here we go. And we have Venus. And Venus is yellow here because its atmosphere is made up of sulfuric acid gas. Seriously, inhospitable planet. But that said, Venus is quite powerful, and you can see that I have these Schisandra berries. And in my last video, Schisandra berries were one of the ingredients in the fatty liver tincture. But in China, they are considered a five element plant. They're one of the few plants that actually addresses and has strengths with all five of the Eastern elements. Uh, and, so that has to do with equipoise or spiritual balance within a dream. Because one of the things that can happen to you in a dream, if you go deeply into the dream world and you're trying to find something out, you can get out of balance. Well, Shisandra berries will help me stay in balance in the dream. And then again, the threads of destiny and Camino. I have a friend who has hiked the Camino Trail in Spain once and has made reservations again because it was such a spiritually nurturing thing for her. And she is going to go over there in the autumn and hike this Camino Trail. It's like 80, 90, 100 miles, I don't know. Uh, but it leads to St. James's tomb, I believe, in there in Spain. And a Camino, I tend to look at the Eight of Cups, that has the guy walking off into the distance. That's a Camino. That's a solitary spiritual journey. In the indigenous tribes, there is often a rite of passage where a young man or young woman may go out in the wilderness on a vision quest, and that involves fasting and dreaming and so on. And so, the Shisandra berries are they were an essential ingredient here, and they're kind of like stiff raisins. They're a little sticky still, so they were challenging to pound into a powder. I didn't quite make it into a powder, but it was ground down enough to where I could use it and fill this little jar. But Camino, the spirit journey, the destiny, and the equipoise, and then peach. I have a special affinity for peach. These leaves came from my peach tree in my yard, and the peach spirit is amazingly powerful, and it's been a really, really strong ally for me. Uh, anyway, so that helps you incubate dreams, which means basically you ask your dream talisman, "Hey, I want to dream about this." And it will incubate the dream for you. And then if you can become lucid within that dream and begin exercising your will and asking questions, you can learn a lot. So anyway, and it also contributes to wisdom, ancestral wisdom. And I venerate my ancestors, seen and unseen. They have my back. And then spirit connections. Licorice root, again, another ingredient in that fatty liver tincture, but it's also good for dream work. It helps with intuition. And you'll see this rock. This is a slice of Laramar, and it's really good for lucid dreams and for dream recall. It's a very strong water element crystal. And then, of course, you have a mourning dove feather. I found this in my yard. Mourning doves often visit me. They remind my wife of her dad, who passed away uh, many years ago. And, every time she hears a dove, a brown dove, she thinks of her dad and his spirit, and she hears the voice of his spirit. So the mourning dove feather has special meaning for me. And so I decided when I found this feather, I thought, you know what? I'm going to put it in this talisman. And it's a good thing, too, because when I looked up what mourning doves can do in dream work, they provide angelic guidance and divine insight. I definitely want those things in my dream work. And then, of course, you have the white sage. And I didn't actually put the white sage in the talisman. I used the smoke from this particular piece of white sage to purify the room and the bag that I'm going to load with the talisman materials, the ingredients. So, again, there's your Venus. And last, but certainly not least, we have Mercury. And these are my mercury ingredients. Now, aspen, I love the aspen leaves. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the oldest tree in the world is 80,000 years old, and it is a stand of aspen trees in Utah. And it looks like a whole forest of trees, a whole grove, but it's only got one root system. That's what makes aspen leaves, which are a form of poplar, so amazing. Well, anyway, I that's what this is one of my favorite air element influencers. So when I'm going to do an air element influence ritual, I'm aspen is usually going to be one of my ingredients. Not always, but usually it will, because it whispers on the wind. That's what the aspen leaves do. They whisper divine messages on the wind. That's a very sacred thing. And so, but they also help you overcome fear, because the last thing you want to succumb to in a dream is fear, because there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to be afraid in a dream if you are, in fact, a servant of the light. And if you have elemental equipoise, the elemental equilibrium, you're going to be fine. But it's easy to feel fear. And it also taps ancestral wisdom, and it gives you insights from God or divine providence or the divine mind. Dill has such a nice smell. I like the dill herb, and it protects people from night terrors. And so I thought, well, that's good. Let's go ahead and put that in there. And peppermint is really fun. It allows for control in dreams and makes them clear and easy to remember. So there's your mercury ingredients. That's what's in this bag. So now, oh, two more ingredients, the Psalms. I use Psalms a lot in my magic, and the two Psalms that are known for use in dream work, dream questioning, which means incubate a dream that gives you information for a specific, in a specific thing, Psalm 23 and Psalm 39. And, as you can see, I have handwritten these Psalms on parchment. And then I have an incantation in the name of Yod He Vav He. Let these Psalms help me understand and interpret my dreams. Amen, amen, amen. Selah, Selah, Selah. Um, some of this came, I did a combined ritual. Some of it came from Jacobus Swartz, Magical Psalms, and some of it came from Gene Kent's work, Master Book of Psalms. And then, of course, I anointed this piece of parchment because it's front and back. This is one piece of paper. So it's front and back, covered with writing. And then I anointed it with a bremlin oil. And a bremlin oil is the recipe is actually in the Old Testament for a bromelain oil. I think it's in Genesis or so. I don't know, but I usually buy my bromelain oil from Art of the Root. They're very reputable, but I charge my own. So when I get it, I act as if it has not been charged because it hasn't. I'm going to charge it the way I want to charge it as an amplifier. And so I've got the jar, right? And I add a secret ingredient about it. And a good search on Google will probably reveal what ingredient that might be. But, I do add a secret and yet I think biblical still ingredient for it. Um, and it is an amplifier. It's one of the oils I use to anoint things to increase their power, because a psalm can also be used as a talisman or as part of a compound talisman, and the abramelin oil essentially amplifies the power of that psalm. So you always want to, use an oil to anoint the psalm, or I always use an oil to anoint the psalm. So anyway, enough of that. Oh my goodness. And then the last step was smudging the inside of the bag and the room. And you can see all my little jars in the background, they're blurry. I had already charged them. I was exhausted. This was the end of the day. I was like, and so I've got the smudge stick and I smudged the room and I smudged the inside of the bag. And then I anointed it with my abramelin oil. And later I anointed it with opening oil too. That's the way opener oil. Very, very interesting. And it definitely, these oils definitely juice up a talisman. They really do. So anyway, that's it. And then here's the chemical exaltation. You can see all the ingredients. They're inside the bag. The bag is open, and I'm going to pour. I think I put about 40 drops of Aurum Metallicum in the bag to, because I had already, remember, I had charged each of these ingredients individually with its best attributes in dream work, and I combined them all, and then I dripped like 40 drops of Aurum Metallicum in there, and that's the chemical exaltation that seals in that charge. But again, you also have to feed with a bag talisman, you always have to feed it. So periodically, you need to meditate with it. Before you're going to use it, you need to speak to it, and you should anoint it. You should feed it. And my main feeding things for these bag talismans, these conjure bags, is generally bromelain oil and opening oil. But I've got some other oils that I also use, for specific purposes. Anyway, enough of that. Here's the finished product after I've been testing it for 2 weeks. Did it work? Oh, 100%. This talisman put me through a bunch of changes. Um, I showed you on the second slide of this thing, my own discipline, a day in the life. I mean, I'm pretty disciplined about my magic work, and I've been hitting it pretty hard. Well, I've been having interesting stuff happen. Um, I've had uh, pressure in my forehead, right between my eyebrows, as I meditate and pray, and that pressure has gone sideways around my head. I've also felt stuff on the back of my crown. Um, I've had serious, I've had night sweats, all kinds of stuff. Um, and, when I started using this talisman, the first night, I spoke to it, I anointed it, I set it on my nightstand next to my bed, and I had powerful dreams. I had powerful dreams, and I was able to recall them. I mean, my recall is completely back. No problem there. Um, but one thing I should mention about all talismans, you need to train them just like you need to train your mirror. Just because you charge a talisman and get it all ready, you got to work with it. You have to make it an ally because these conjure bags have spirit allies in them. That's the ingredients. I have made each of the spirits of each of these materials in this talisman an ally in the great work. So, I mean, they're serious. So you got to tell them what you want. And so that's what I did. The second night, oh my God, I woke up, I slept horribly. I kept going to sleep and I woke up at around 3 in the morning, like or 2:30 in the morning, and the sheets were just soaked. Man, I had this night sweat. It was horrible. And I had a headache and I was ugh, you know, and the next day I didn't feel worth a hoot, and it was a work day. So it's like, yeah, yeah, Mr. Frauder is going to be real productive today. No, not so. I was not productive. And then the following night, I backed off on using the dream talisman because it was so powerful. But what happened is I woke up the next day with just this horrible runny nose. I mean, I thought I was going to have to make an irrigation system so I could water the backyard. It was just really runny nose, and and it wasn't a cold. It was not a cold, and pollen counts were low. I think this was my body throwing off stuff out of the shadow, and so I'm sitting there going, "What's going on? What's happening to me?" And I start looking it up, and apparently it's a Kundalini awakening. And I'm sitting there going, well, I never thought much about Kundalini. I'm a child of the West. I don't do yoga. I haven't studied under an Eastern guru or mystic. I mean, I've heard of Kundalini, of course, who hasn't? But I never really thought about it much in my own practice. But I'll tell you what, every day I pray a special prayer at least once, more often than that most of the time. And basically, I start off. I practice through an esoteric Christian lens because I see the Godhead as the Christ Spirit that is my birthright that can fill me and radiate from me and bless the world. That's kind of how I see it. So, anyway, where was I? I was talking about the the dream work. oh, the Kundalini awakening. Oh my God. So this prayer moves energy around. Okay. So I start off saying, I am crucified with Christ. Henceforth, it is not me who lives, but Christ who lives in me, because I want to kill that little ego self that's screaming, me, selfish, selfish, selfish. Get rid of him completely. And I want to have my higher self completely take over. That's what we're talking about here by taking up your, crucified with Christ. That's what it is. That's what Paul meant when he wrote that. Um, but then the second part of the prayer is I pray to perceive as Christ, to breathe the breath of life, to speak the word, to love with the heart of Christ, to work with the will of Christ, and to feel with the compassion of Christ. And then I don the full armor of God, and that's my invocation prayer. That's how I connect with the Godhead, if I'm going to do a ritual. Um, But I've been doing that for months and months. And those are the kind of prayers when you pray something like that and you mean it, that prayer will 100% be answered. Well, that moving that energy, because I'm going straight down the chakras, with perceive as Christ does, breathe the breath of life, I'm going right down the line. And darned if I didn't start having this Kundalini thing happen. So, but I recovered from that, um, and I continued to use this dream talisman. And this last night I was using it, and I got a symbol of I was looking through a glass, and with my mind I drew crosshairs on that glass. And of course, the symbolism behind that is to remain on mission. Keep your eye on the prize. Because I don't own a gun. I don't. So I have, but I'm very mission driven. And so those crosshairs were the mission. But I've had all kinds of dreams since I started testing this thing. It's very powerful. So anyway, uh, this is the last slide of this show, I think. And I wish all of you the best. And I'm going to keep putting out these videos to help inform your practice because I don't think there's enough stuff out there about how to do some of this stuff, you know? It's all about the exercises and building up the skills, but then how are you going to put those to use once you build it up? And, I'm a working magus. So there it is. Thank you for listening, and there will be another video soon.